Hey, Pete, how are you going?
Hey, William, doing well.
Oh,
I
look at
was
that.
I was tempted to join you in that quiz, but it would be a little unfair being a Melburnian myself.
You should already have a hoodie though, right?
I think it's in the mail.
It's on its way. Now, Pete, you've got an awesome piano in the background there. I thought you were more of a data guy rather than a musician.
You know, I'm multi-talented, believe it or not.
All right. So can you play for us a sort of Power BI jingle on that piano at the end of the session?
Look, you put me on the spot. So the answer is today, no. With a
I'll
45-minute
wait for
session,
YouTube version.
I'm concerned that I don't even have enough time to talk about all of the awesomeness that I want to talk about.
I've had a peek at your talk abstract there. So you're going to be talking to us about Power BI and some rich interactive visualizations. So can you give us a quick tip of what's coming up?
Right. So if you're familiar with Power BI, awesome. If you're not, in the shortest possible definition, it is a data visualization service. Now, the topic that I have is how can we take those awesome data visuals and embed them into our apps? And why would we do it? And if we do need to do it, how could we go about it? And that's really what I'm looking to explain in this 45-minute session.
Oh, that sounds great. I'm looking forward to it as well. I'm very, very interested in all of this visualization stuff. So please, Pete, take it away.
I will do. From a point of view of the microphone, is that all sounding good on your end? I'm going to take that was a yes. So
yes, from me, it sounds perfect. I can hear you loud and clear.
Fantastic. All right. So are we sharing my presentation? There we go. Power BI Embedded Analytics Explained. So welcome. My name is Peter Myers, and I'm very privileged to be speaking here at NDC Melbourne. And so let me briefly introduce myself. So I work for my own company, Bitwise Solutions. I am a data platform specialist with a focus on business intelligence. And I've been working alongside Microsoft for well over 20 years now. Originally as an instructor and an MDT, teaching people about SQL Server 2000. But having evolved alongside Microsoft Stack, you know, that's meant a journey of not just SQL Server BI, but moving into Office BI with Excel and Power Pivot. And in more recent years, of course, the evolution of Power BI, which is the leading, you know, data analytics service available in the market today. So many years ago, I was a developer. And in fact, I remember being on a project the very day that .NET got released. That was some date in February 2002. So this topic brings the worlds together of a developer and business intelligence. And so what I would like to do is know a little bit more about who you are, and this could be intriguing. What I have here is a survey. You can either use the bit.ly link across the top or the QR code, and you'll be presented with, I think, 4 questions that tell me a little bit about who you are. This is important for my demonstration, so I need some data. You're going to help me. Go ahead, answer the questions as honestly as you can, click submit, and then what you'll see before you here is a Power BI dashboard that has been configured for real time. All right, so as you click submit, we should see some results coming up here in the dashboard. So I'll give you a moment to tell us about who you are by your role, your country, your Power BI experience, and what would be the most important topic for you in this presentation. All right, so far, count of 7 coming in. So as a data visualization service, it has a full capability to deliver real-time analytics as well. This is being delivered through what we know as a push data set. So programmatically using the Power BI REST API, we can push rows of data into a data set, and a dashboard will reflect real-time updates. You can also leverage Azure Stream Analytics, or there are other capabilities like direct query modeling that provide you automatic page refresh. All right, so as these numbers come in, I get a grip, mainly Aussies in the audience, which probably makes sense given the time zone. But we see some from Europe, some from Africa. Looking at the buy roll, really, it's not a surprise here for this conference that software developers are the major group of people. So welcome. It is a session targeting software developers and in particular app developers looking to embed analytics in their apps. Now, as the results are coming in, take a look at the column chart along the bottom that tells me about your self-rating for Power BI. And welcome to those 8 that have confessed that they have no background in Power BI. And that's certainly a great starting point for this presentation because I'll launch into the fundamentals in just a moment. Right up to the fact that we've got some ninjas. All right, so a question that someone might have when looking at this dashboard could well be, yes, but what is the average Power BI experience? Okay, so as those results are still coming in, what I can do is close the full screen mode. And at the top left, you'll see that I can ask a question of the data. And Power BI has its own, what can we say? It's like a search engine. You can sort of enter a natural language question like, what is the average Power BI experience? And look at the way Power BI already suggests. And the answer to that question could be delivered to me here as a single value. And because that's a value that I want to monitor over time, I can at the top right corner click pin the visual, and then I can pin it back to the dashboard, whereupon that can now be monitored. Now, as to why it said 6.5 and now it's 2.74, I think the 6.5 was my earlier test and it cached the result. But the genuine result based on the fact that we have 35 submissions is that we're looking somewhere between a rating of 2 and 3. Now, just returning to Q&A, the map is a great visual, but sometimes it doesn't give you the detail at a glance you want. So I could also say, what were the, survey count by country? And I can see here that 30 from Australia. Next runner-up, we're looking at Germany by 2, Ethiopia, India, and Norway. So welcome, and thanks for participating in that survey. The other thing I'll point out is that this is a Power BI dashboard. Yet when I click on a tile, what Power BI is doing here is navigating or clicking through to an underlying report. Okay, so we can see the same data as a report. This is a very different experience. While it may look similar, the report is designed for interactivity of your end users. And so often when embedding Power BI visualizations into apps, it is going to be the report, not the dashboard, but a report experience. And a report comprises 1 or possibly multiple pages. But just look what I can do here by clicking on the bubble for Australia. This is what we know as a cross highlight. So from Australian survey results, I can see that 19 of the 20 software developers are Australian. And I also get an idea here across the Power BI experience, including that the average self-rating for Australians is 3.09. If we try that again one more time, and we've got a couple of people from Germany, then I can see here that the 2 people from Germany that have come in have given themselves a self-rating of 0 and 3, giving us that average of 1.5. Now, page 2 of the report gives me an idea about what is most important for you. So the top ranking topic for you in today's session is the fundamentals of Power BI. Not surprising, given that 8 of you were coming in with 0 experience. The next one is Power BI Embedded Fundamentals, which really is the heart and the soul of what I'm going to talk to you about in these 45 minutes. And client APIs will be covered and data permissions will be covered as well. All right, so switching back to my presentation. That pretty much sets me up for an agenda of introducing Power BI and Power BI Embedded, and then describing the client APIs and how data permissions can work. I'll wrap up quickly with a discussion of automating solution management, leave you with some resources, and then open up for any questions that you might have. And by the way, I'll be sharing a link at the end of the presentation that will allow you to download a PDF document of these slides, including any links that I've included. So let's begin from the very beginning about what Power BI is. So I've already mentioned that it's a data visualization service, and so it's from Microsoft. If you're already working with Microsoft and Microsoft 365, that you've got your Outlook and your whole productivity suite set up, Power BI works within the very same tenant of Microsoft 365. Bottom line is this: the most common way to use Power BI is as a cloud service, is that you're going to publish data to the service. And the way that you create these data solutions would be using a tool like Power BI Desktop, which is a freely downloadable application for Windows. And thereupon, that tool does two things. It allows you to connect to your data and create a model over your data. And a model is a way of taking your source data and structuring it in a way that's going to support the analytic requirements that Power BI needs. It also allows you to create more friendly and intuitive experiences to support your application users when navigating through the data. When Power BI Desktop creates these data solutions, they are published to the service. They become what is known as a data set. And then that data set becomes the source of data for reports and potentially dashboards. Now, just a word about keeping that data current. If those data sources are accessible by the internet, then generally speaking, Power BI can, on an automated frequency, can refresh the data to keep it current. Or if you're working with data behind your firewall on premises, there are gateways that you can install, allowing Power BI to securely communicate with that data as and when needed. Lastly, from an access point of view, my demonstration there with the dashboard was using what we call the Power BI service, which is really just a web portal. So any of the major supported web browsers, so we're talking Edge, Chrome, Firefox, Safari, all you need to do is go to powerbi.com, sign in to get access to your data. There are native mobile apps as well for iOS and for Android. So it's pretty simple just to install them from their respective stores, sign into Power BI to gain access to your reports and dashboards. But really what we're here to talk about is beyond the portal and beyond the native apps, is that you can embed rich analytics directly inside your own apps. So from a product portfolio perspective, I'm just going to touch off on the authoring perspective. There are two free tools that you will use to create and publish your solutions to Power BI. The Power BI service is critical because it is the service that hosts your data and is responsible for all of the rendering and delivery of reports. Power BI Premium is a license available to you, and it could become relevant depending on the scenario that you use to embed. More on that coming soon in this presentation. Power BI Report Server doesn't deserve a mention here because it's an on-premises delivery of Power BI, especially targeting customers that perhaps aren't ready for the cloud, or there are some legal or governance concerns about using the cloud. It doesn't form part of my discussion today. Lastly, and highly relevant to what I'm talking about, is that Power BI Embedded is a product allowing you to package up rich data visualizations, embed them in your apps. Okay, so let's start the discussion then with embedded analytics. So in the digital workplace, embedded analytics should occur within a natural workflow. We don't like the idea of sending users outside your app, potentially to get distracted by doing something else and forgetting what they're doing. So there shouldn't be this need to continue to move in and out of apps. Yet statistics are telling us that up to 22% of employees are accessing the data that they need to make informed decisions. They're having to either do without good data to make a decision, or they're having to move outside the environment. So as a minimum requirement, what you're looking to deliver is obviously good quality, up-to-date, credible, consistent data. And then the best way to communicate from data to your users is often through data visualization. It's far easier at a glance to gain an understanding of the data than it is to look at a lot of detail or a lot of numbers and attempt to make sense of them. And of course, the last requirement would be that you've got some app that has some genuine requirement to have data visualizations embedded. So what it comes down to is this, is that you have basically two options. The first option is, well, do you build it? Do you go and create these data models and these visualizations from scratch? And yes, you can do it. And perhaps you've done this or you've been reliant on this in the past, but your experience might well tell you that it's very time consuming and therefore expensive. And it's a shift of focus of what you're really there to do as an app developer. So the other option is, just buy it. So if an existing service exists, then embed it. And this approach is simple and easy and faster time to market, cost effective. And of course, as a product like Power BI evolves, which it does very rapidly, it's in its 6th year, but still we're seeing month by month incremental new features taking the product to even higher levels. So you can leverage those new features in your app as and when they're released. So now would be a great time to switch from the fundamentals of Power BI to talk about, well, what is Power BI embedded? So what it means is that Power BI content, whether it's a Power BI dashboard or a report, or even that Q&A experience where the natural language can be used by the user to look for the answers that they need. This is often good because sometimes as an app developer, you may not know what questions to answer. There are probably some obvious questions to answer, and you can build pre-built reports and dashboards to support that. But what about the other questions that you haven't anticipated? Well, the answer is that Power BI would let you embed Q&A into your app to allow that free-form questioning. So Power BI Embedded lets you embed rich visualizations into your apps. You can embed any Power BI content, and essentially it works by adding an iframe to your web page. It relies on web standards like HTML5 and JavaScript, and it works in web apps, mobile apps, and even thick client applications. As I'll describe shortly, you can then seamlessly integrate Power BI content using the Power BI client APIs. Now, there are SDK resources to support you and different development platforms. So officially .NET, .NET Core, JavaScript, and TypeScript. And there are also samples available in Node.js, Python, and Java. So they can provide you a quick start or a great educational experience to take an existing solution and perhaps reverse engineer it to learn from it. There are 5 different types of content that you can consider embedding in your apps. The reports, or even a single visual from a report page. Power BI also supports paginated reports, and if you already have background in SQL Server reporting services, you can think of paginated reports in Power BI as being the new generation of SQL Server reporting services. In fact, it's almost identical. There are a couple of things that are different, but you can think of them as being the same, and therefore paginated reports hosted in the Power BI servers can also be embedded in your app. Next, we have dashboards like the dashboard used to analyze your survey inputs, or a single tile from a dashboard, even if it's real time, can be embedded in your app. And lastly, the Q&A experience. Now, one other thing to point out here is that if you're going to embed Power BI reports, which by the way is the most common content type of Power BI to embed in an app, is that it can also be used as a creation experience. So your app can allow users to create new reports or edit reports and save them back. All right, so it's not necessarily just a consumption experience. Now, there's an important distinction to be made that when you're embedding content, is it being embedded for your organization, in other words, for the users in your org, or is it for your customers? And the difference comes down to development methodology will differ, but licensing. Okay, so just to cover off on what it means that if you're embedding Power BI for your organization, they're basically users within your org, right? So from a licensing point of view, it's very straightforward. They just need the licenses to access the content. And therefore, from an app perspective, there's no special consideration for licensing or to pay any more. The point is that if they can access the content through the Power BI service in the web portal, or if they can use a native app, a mobile app, then they've got permission already. So the reason that you might consider embedding for your organization is that you want to create a custom experience rather than relying on Microsoft's portals. All right, so it's targeted at your internal users. Authentication happens through Azure AD. End users will require Power BI licensing. It uses an interactive authentication flow. And in documentation, you might see this being discussed as the user owns the data scenario. Now, the other scenario targets more the ISV, and that is for your customers, where the user base are external users. And this allows your app to use its own authentication store and its own methods. And the whole concept here is that your end users do not have licenses to access the Power BI content. It uses a non-interactive authentication flow using either service principal or what's known as a master user, and it goes by the name of app owns data. So the difference is internal users versus my app users do not have access to the Power BI content that we're hosting. All right, generally speaking, from a development methodology and just to fast track the flow that might take place is that in Power BI, you'll create what's known as a workspace. And a workspace is a container for Power BI content, and it allows you to prepare your data and to create reports, dashboards, and so on. It is also a security boundary. So you'll provide sufficient security for your app to gain access to the content within the workspace. Next, you're going to build up that content. So at a minimum, you need some data and perhaps one report, if not more. Then you need to move into Azure, and you need to register an Azure AD application, which will be used as part of the authentication flow in your app. To bring in the required libraries, you'll import various NuGet packages, and I have a slide on that shortly. In your web app, you'll configure app settings that set the settings to the Power BI service endpoints, but also set the workspace that contains the content that you're looking to embed and other identity information. What is the identity that will be used by my app to authenticate with Power BI on behalf of users and to gain access to content? Next, you're going to then add that iframe into your web page, and with client-side libraries, you're going to call methods that are going to embed content. Now, what will happen server-side is it's going to have to embed tokens that gain access to content. So the first thing is authentication requires an access token. If you're embedding on behalf of your customers, then the additional development step will be to generate what's known as an embed token. And that embed token represents claims for particular Power BI content on behalf of the user. Next, you can enhance the user experience. So you can do whatever it takes to embed that in a meaningful way. And we'll talk about this in a little more detail when I come to the client APIs. And then lastly, configuring data permissions. Now, actually, security should never be a last consideration, but in the list here, data permissions comes down to the fact that your user base might all have access to the same reports, but not necessarily to the same data. And so therefore, it's possible to use what we call effective identity to limit data visibility for various users. For example, the manager has the ability to see all of the data, but individuals can only see their specific projects that they're working on. All right, so we'll talk about that in a bit more detail shortly. Now, just to provide you some resources that if you are looking to explore this, there are some sample solutions available on GitHub, and I'll share the links with you shortly. And when you go into the sample solutions, you can either download a zip file containing a pre-built solution to embed for your customers or to embed for your organization. All right. Sorry, by the way, there's a workflow set up. So you can follow, I think, 4 to 5 different steps, and the result of you setting everything up, perhaps uploading your own content or using sample content, the result is it will download a zip file that contains a Visual Studio solution and everything's set up, ready to go. All right, so once we've got the embed happening, there's quite an amazing suite of things that you can do client-side. So at this point, let me switch across to what I have here. So something that's very, very useful you to be aware of as a developer is that we've got these, what's known as the playground. So I've just got to find here on my desktop where the playground is sitting. Here it is here. Again, the link will be shared in my presentation. Now, Microsoft have gone to great lengths to build this playground, and the name suggests it is a little bit fun because it provides you this experience to really explore and try out embedded without a lot of effort, certainly very little investment in time, and certainly no investment in money. So coming to home, what I like to do is say, let's do this. Let's go straight to the explore the APIs. And what you can see happening right here is that a sample Power BI report is being embedded. Okay, and if you want to switch and look at the other options you've got, like show me what it's like to embed a specific report visual instead of an entire page, or a paginated report, then those options have already been set up for you. All right, and this paginated report being, of course, multi-pages. There we'll go. The next option is a dashboard or a single tile from a dashboard, or let's embed the Q&A experience. Now, noting that if you're going to embed a report, you can also check out what is it like if I want to allow the user to edit and therefore save changes back. And now you can see here in the embedding frame that they've got that ability. What I really want to point out to you, though, is that once an embed's been achieved, take a look in the Explore Our APIs pane, where you can see that there are an enormous number of operations that you can run client-side to navigate between pages, manage the authoring of reports, apply filters, and so on. Now, what's pretty cool about this is that the developer sandbox allows you to use a sample or to select your own report. So what I want to show you here is that I'm going to come into my own Power BI tenant, and I have a workspace called survey, and the data that you submitted in your survey has come through to this report, the PBIE NDC Melbourne. And so even here in the playground, I can embed my own report, and here it is. Now, what's pretty cool is that you can start to play with the code here, and then you can run the code and see the result that is being embedded. And so I thought I'd share one example with you, and that would be on filtering. What if I go ahead and filter the page? So I'll go and add a page filter. Now, if I click on the little eye icon here, I can see that this adds filters to the report page. If I click on the ellipsis, I can show a code snippet. All right, so then it's just a matter of copying and pasting it and adapting it for use in my own app. But this is so cool, is that what I can do is actually drag that into the code window here. And for example, I can just adapt this to say, filter the survey table, and there's a column named country, and I'm only interested in a filter on Germany. And let me go ahead then and run this, to which we can see client side, we've been able to filter the page. All right, so think about it. It might be you're navigating from a customer's record, and now you want to do some analysis of the customer. So you can pass the customer key in as a filter. All right, so what we're describing here is that we have this ability to work with lots of client-side operations. How it works is your client application hosts the iframe. Your embedded report is inside that iframe, and the client APIs are bidirectional, allowing you to communicate in and for Power BI to communicate back out to the app. All right, so there are many supported capabilities, and as one example, user interactions are natively supported by Report View. Users can do anything like cross-filter, they can download data, they can sort, they can interact in every way that Power BI supports. And your application can subscribe to these events. And in response to the user clicking on something, the application can then do something. All right, so dynamic report layouts are a possibility as well. Working with bookmarks that capture state and allow the replaying of state can also happen. And report visual creation and personalization can also take place within the app. All right, so consider what we call an in-context analytics workflow, where the user navigates within the app shows the report filtered to a specific view, the user interactively filters the data in the report, they click on a button, and then the app does something in response to clicking on the button. Well, switching back to the playground, it allows me to come back to the home and say, let's take a look at the showcases. In fact, you'll find the showcases here on the left. And that very scenario that I've described quite quickly is available for you here in a sample report. So for example, embedded, we've got this list of customers and their purchasing patterns. We can interact by modifying slicer values. And using the client-side APIs, we've enhanced this visual that when we click on campaign, all of the filtered customers are now available here. And then I could narrow it down further and say, okay, these are the customers that I want to target in a marketing campaign. Go ahead, send them a coupon. Here is the subject of the email, and here is the detail, click send. Okay, it's obviously just a sample, but it's this concept of working in a report, but having your application respond to your behaviors within the report. All right. So while time doesn't permit in this presentation, there are further showcases. For example, personalizing top insights, customizing report colors within the app itself, allowing the user to determine what works best for them. Okay, so next topic. Remember, this is high level, giving you an idea of what Power BI Embedded can do for you. In that scenario where we don't want all users to see the same data, we've got this ability to enforce what we call row-level permissions. All right, user one, when they access the report within your app, gets to see Australian sales. But the very same app, but a different user signed in, accessing the same report, gets to see German sales. So this is achieved in Power BI by what we call row-level security. And in Power BI Desktop, as the data modeling tool, you can create what are known as roles. And these roles enforce permissions under certain circumstances. And when you add these roles into your model and publish it, when your application needs to generate its embed token, remember the claim that it will present to embed the content, it will also embed the effective identity of your current application user. Now remember, these users do not need permission to your Power BI content directly. And therefore, when you define effective identity, you're able to map them to the appropriate role. For example, this is the sales director. They will be mapped to a role that gives them permission to see all sales territory data. But when an individual sales rep uses the same app, your effective identity will map them to a role where they can only see the sales territories to which they've been assigned. So Microsoft has a very mature data modeling technology. It evolved from SQL Server analysis services, and today what we know as the tabular engine for analysis services is available in Power BI as its data modeling engine. Now, that says a couple of things. Mature technology, but also the fact is that these models can be developed in Power BI Desktop, or if you have existing models already with either Azure Analysis Services or SQL Server Analysis Services, then these can also be used by Power BI, and therefore their data can be embedded in your apps. All right, the next topic is automating solution management. And so we'll give consideration to what we can do and what libraries are available, but also relevant for ISVs, where you might want to create multiple instances and yet maintain them as independent for each of your individual tenants. We'll talk about workspace-based isolation. So when it comes to automation, this is pretty important for us as developers. It can be used for lifecycle management in the way that you might manage your Power BI content and deploy it, for onboarding a new customer in a multi-tenant solution, or for IT operations and maintenance. So you can work with the Microsoft Graph API when working with Azure AD. Power BI has its own REST API that allows managing content and the service itself. And then there's the Azure Resource Management API as well. Now, with the Power BI REST API, we use it to access and manage Power BI content, like creating new workspaces, assigning workspaces to the capacities, which is a licensing discussion, granting permission to access content within a workspace, or importing new content, be them new data models, data sets or reports. Relevant for the ISV then is where you must have separation of tenants. And this can be easily achieved in Power BI by using the workspace as a boundary for each individual tenant. So that way, when you want to absolutely make sure that there is no potential mix-up, is that you will just create one workspace per tenant. But because you're likely to leverage and repeat the content that you already have, the way automation to be set up is like this. You create what we call the golden workspace. This doesn't belong to any tenant, but it is like the template of which is your perfect data and reports. What you would then do is through scripts, you would create the identity that Power BI will use to access, and then you will use it to create a workspace and then clone or copy all those data sets and reports. You might also do things like update connection strings if you need to point to a separate instance of your data source. And then you will assign it to a capacity, which is a licensing concept I'll talk about shortly. Now, what this means is every time you onboard a new tenant, you're just going to run your script that will then copy the golden workspace into a tenant dedicated workspace. And then it will have its specific identifiers that your embedding app will use to connect. I want to finish on the discussion of licensing. So licensing will differ according to whether you're embedding on behalf of users that belong to your org or their customers. Remember, if it's embedding for your organization, the licensing discussion is that they need licenses themselves because they're the end users within your organization. You're welcome to embed that content, and there's really no special requirement beyond that. But if you're embedding for your customer, well, then you will need some licensing from Microsoft. So embedding for your organization requires that your application users have a Power BI Pro license. They will require Power BI Premium per user licensing as well if they're dependent on specific features for what we call PPU or Premium per user. It's possible that they do not have these licenses, yet if you're using Power BI Premium and the content that they're accessing resides in a workspace that is in a premium capacity, then they do not need these Pro or Premium per user licenses necessarily. All right, so there's a greater bit of research that you'll need to do, but at the end of the day, from an app perspective, you're not concerned with licensing. You will generate an access token, which will then be used by your app to access content on behalf of your user, and they either have access or they don't. Now, when embedding for your customers, there are two options that you can purchase what's known as a P SKU or an A SKU. Now, there's some good news for you as an app developer that if you're wanting to trial or evaluate and you don't want to invest in buying any licenses, then what happens is that every user in Power BI that has a Pro or a Premium per user license, they have a limited number of, what can we say, free tokens that can be generated. All right, now providing that you do not use them for production workloads, then you can go ahead and use these free tokens to experiment with embedding for your customer. There is an API method that will let you determine what the usage percentage is. All right, so a quick comparison between A SKU and P SKU. The A SKU is actually an Azure resource. It is named Power BI Embedded, and you will purchase it in the Azure portal. It's billed hourly. There's no commitment to use it for any period of time, and it provides full elasticity. So you can scale up or down according to demand. You can even pause it and therefore turn the cost off. And this can all be automated as well through the ARM API. Now, P SKU is Power BI Premium, and it's purchased through Office 365. It provides you the ability to generate embed tokens, but there is a monthly billing and a monthly commit and a yearly commit for working with Power BI Premium. In addition to embedding content, however, you get Power BI Report Server, and you get the ability to do some other cool things. Now, the guidance that I would provide you at a very high level as a developer, if you were interested in embedding for your customers, your Power BI content, then generally speaking, enterprises buy Power BI Premium because they want to benefit from the ability to share content with non-licensed users and other features in Premium. whereas ISVs generally purchase the Power BI embedded product or the A SKU. But it's not set in stone. You don't necessarily have to do it because you're an ISV. What you would do is weigh up what are the capabilities and features on offer and what makes the best sense for what we're delivering. But there is a final word that I'd like to give you. And again, if you're moving into that territory of we're interested, we want to evaluate and test, is that at very low cost, remember, once you've used those free embed tokens, and remember, they can't be used for production workloads. But if you want to start testing it, the cheapest option available to you today is to purchase an A1 node, which is US $1 per hour. And remember, you can pause and resume this. So it comes to about $720 US a month, allows you for small scale to start out. And it'll also allow you to determine, well, according to the workloads and the number of users and the demands that our application is making, that if the A1 might be sufficient, or maybe we need to at some point scale up to an A2 based on the demands that are being made from customers. All right, so for those that are intrigued, want to know more, want to trial it, this is the low-cost option, $1 an hour while you're working with embedded content. In my final minutes then, very quickly, because you can download the PDF, is that there are resources like the embedded playground link. There's also the embed setup tool. NuGet package links are available. Sample applications available from GitHub, and samples for all of these technologies as well. I'm going to leave this slide up now and then open for any questions there might be. But if you click on this link or use the QR code, you can download the presentation, and all of the resources that I've talked about are available to you. Now would be a great time to know if there are any questions that I can answer. William, I'm not hearing you.
Oh, I've done a second last moment.
Now I'm hearing you.
He's got to press 2 unmute buttons these days. That was a great presentation, Pete. There's a lot of Power BI that I didn't know existed. So I'm definitely going to be looking into the playground. I think that's for me going to be a good start. There aren't any questions in the Q&A section, but I've got one of my own. So when we're building a visualization in Power BI, and I've got a data set that, or a component that doesn't quite fit what I'm trying to show, is there a way, can we build our own visualizations, custom?
Yeah, absolutely. So great question. So there is a complete framework for custom visuals, allowing you to build exactly what you want. Now, it's not a trivial thing to do, by the way, William. So if you do have skills in HTML and working with graphics libraries, working with TypeScript, and CSS, if you have all of those skills, then yes, Power BI will allow you to package up your own visual, and then you can use that in your embedded apps as well.
Oh, so you talking like libraries like, say, D3 or...
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, at the end of the day, you're rendering HTML, so any graphics or drawing library that you want can be used, and then you can package up your own visual. There's also a marketplace out there. There are some very sharp individuals that are producing their own custom visuals and profiting from that.
Okay, so there's ones you can pay for, the free ones as well?
Lots of free ones. So if you go into Power BI and you edit a report, in your visualizations pane, there'll be a ... button. When you click it, you can then go to the app source and you can import from Microsoft's and the community, by the way, a very, very lot of custom visuals there too.
Do you happen to have a link to that library or the marketplace?
Look, I don't.
Marketplace.
If you just do a quick search on Power BI custom visual, you would pretty much land quickly on Microsoft Docs, and it would lead you from there.
Pete, thank you very, very much. Telling us what we can do with our boring data, making it look awesome. Turning that data into some digital gold, I think is super valuable. There's a lot for us to learn from your talk today. So thank you very much, Pete.
You are very welcome. Thanks for having me, William.
No problem.